I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. I don't hear anything through these headphones, nothing at all. I'm wearing them mainly for cosmetic purposes because if I take them off, you can see just how much I need a haircut. Much better, don't you think? Hi, Charlie Meyerson here from ChicagoPublicSquare.com. You know, you get enough gray hairs in this business, and as you know, I have more than enough of those. And people somehow figure you're not a bad person to ask about the future, like having lived through the past somehow makes you smarter about what's next. But I got to tell you, as events of the last 4 years have made perfectly clear, past performance is no guarantee of future results in anything. The decade we're leaving has demonstrated that journalists like me have no business predicting the future, and so please know what I'm about to share with you constitutes hopes and not predictions for the next decade. The past decade of layoffs, bankruptcies, and greedy management atop some of the biggest U.S. media organizations lends itself to dire forecasts about the future of journalism. But much of the chaos is the function of an analog news business making the sometimes painful transition to the digital world. Journalist Simon Owens put it well just a few days ago when he wrote, "In another 5 years or so, we'll stop measuring the health of the industry solely based on the economic fortunes of legacy newspaper chains. By that point," Owens writes, "it'll be beyond dispute that journalism is at its richest point in human history." A news organization freed of a daily newspaper's legacy overhead, real estate, printing presses, distribution, not to mention the demands of predatory ownership, some of which has been accelerated in the pandemic, can now plow much more of its resources into journalism. A low-tech threshold for entry. Anyone can launch a blog, and that blog can become an email newsletter, or vice versa, foretells a new and more vibrant local news ecosystem, and a national news ecosystem for that matter. So, I hope for the survival of legacy local newspaper organizations, even as their newspaper print presence dwindles. But if they don't survive, the talent that's been laid off or taken voluntary buyouts over the last decade can now staff a damned good news organization or three launched from scratch. I hope local TV and radio news operations add depth to their digital presence. Broadcast stations' websites in particular would benefit from more polish and better editing. Anything to keep their pages from looking, as they often do now, like afterthoughts. I hope for disintegration of the radio conglomerates that have strangled creativity up and down the dial. We need a renaissance of local management empowered to create more live and local content, which happens to be broadcast radio's best defense against things like Spotify, Pandora, Apple, and Amazon, and Google. I hope for success of local news organizations' adventures into nonprofit journalism, although I mourn the loss of editorial voices, including endorsements, that will be imposed by that transition. Nonprofits can't make editorial endorsements. I hope the investment and advertising sectors find new ways to properly value the small but real audiences assembled by local news organizations. I hope for continued proliferation of local news sources, more small and independent online services relentlessly focused on neighborhoods, towns, and subject areas not necessarily geographic in orientation. And I hope local news organizations embrace a medium that I believe is the logical successor to the historical function and distribution of the newspaper and the broadcast newscast, and that is email. See ChicagoPublicSquare.com. I do not hope for a return to the days when 2 newspapers, 3 or 4 TV stations, and 1 or 2 radio stations dominated a metro area's news production and consumption. A diversity of reliable, responsible, and well-funded sources is a good thing and a big improvement over the days when a handful of organizations, mostly run by white guys, of which I am one, decided what was newsworthy. And finally, I hope you go out there and make that future a reality. Thanks.